Hello everyone, this is Talha Rehan from Informatica Global Customer Support, and today we'll be talking about Power Exchange for social media, and we'll cover oAuth concept and configuration. This is one mechanism that Informatica adapters for social media use to authorize to a website on behalf of the user. We'll see how this concept is. So agenda for this presentation would be an overview of open authorization and what is the purpose behind using this particular standard, and we'll see configuration with respect to Twitter, and we'll configure an application for Informatica's Power Exchange, and we'll have a demonstration for the same. So social media adapters, like we know Informatica has some adapters which can read or stream data, or rather I would say data from user account from social media sites like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And in fact, these social media sites follow certain standards, and they require applications like Informatica's adapter to send a series of structured messages to their server with respect to the request and the data which is expected from these social media sites. So a certain API standard has to be followed, as well as there is one more challenge here, that user password must not be shared. I mean, the user account which is being used to access data over the social media sites, that account password must not be shared with Informatica's adapter. So this challenge is being overcome or handled by oAuth authorization. We'll see how it works. So basically Informatica's adapter sends a HTTP request, or you can say the communication is based on HTTP, but the social media sites like Twitter or Facebook, they want to know these following the following things, like which application is making the request. For example, here in this case it's Informatica's adapter, so this adapter or an application must be verified by the provider, which can be Facebook, Twitter or LinkedIn, and which user the request is being posted on behalf of. So for example, our Informatica's adapter, and this adapter you want to access data on behalf of your user ID, then that particular user should be known to, or that particular user should be verified by the social media site, and as well as there should be a verification whether the user has granted this application, or user has authorized the application to access his or her data on the social media website. So and one more thing is, we'll have to do some generic check, like if the request is being tampered on the transmission wire, or the request is being faked, or it's being it's being faked by some other user. So all these things are mandated, which are ensured by oAuth authorization. So these few things which are additionally provided by oAuth along with the HTTP request, and these things are part of the HTTP header which is sent from Informatica or any other application which uses oAuth to these social media websites. So or you can say this open authentication is like, in short we can say, it allows notifying a resource provider, which is Facebook, Twitter, etc. in this case, that a resource owner, which can be any user, you, me or someone else, has granted a permission to a third party application like a Facebook application, Twitter application, or in this case an Informatica adapter, access to their private information. So this is basically in a nutshell the expectation from oAuth protocol. And in technical terms, or in technical terms, we can talk like this oAuth protocol. It provides the provider with data about the application, which means that the application can be verified whether the application is using the same key which has been granted earlier from the service provider, which is actually a consumer key and a consumer secret provided to the application. And also it follows a method, you know, and the documentation to be followed by the application when it accesses the URLs at the server. We'll see in an example shortly. So we'll have a quick look at a sample HTTP request with oAuth fields in the header. So if you can see, these authorization fields are added by oAuth when you construct this HTTP request in your application to be sent to the service provider like Facebook or Twitter. And there are a couple of keywords here, or the attributes under this authorization header, which we'll cover shortly what each of them means. So to start with, you see here it says oAuth consumer key, which is nothing but it's a key provided by the service provider or the social media website, here to be specific, to the application at the time this application does the registration to the website. So using this key, the service provider can verify whether this application has been added or registered earlier. And there is some nonce as well, which is to make sure there is no tamperment done to the request in the transmission when it was sent from the application to the provider. There is oAuth signature. oAuth signature actually it also adds to the security, or with which the provider can verify two things. One is the application, and second is the user. So actually the signature is what you can say constructed using the signature method. In this case hashmark sh1 is specified. So using this method and two secret shared keys, one is for the application and one is for the user. So using these two keys, this oAuth is constructed. And we have oAuth token as well. This access token is basically a key which verifies that user has granted access to this application for reading or writing to the user account onto the service or you can say service provider. And then you have a timestamp as well, which would say that this request is not repeated. Maybe it can be some issues at the TCP level wherein the requests are retransmitted, etc. So avoid that. And another thing is you have the version, oAuth version, what is supported, so that same semantics can be carried out as a provider. So this is like a brief description of how these header fields are populated when we are using oAuth authorization. So these are fields listed what we just explained. We can have a look at we can have overlook to understand how this authorization works when you have three parties: user, the oAuth client, which is nothing but the application, or in this case in Informatica's context is adapter for social media, and you have the oAuth server. This component resides at the service provider. So initially what happens is when a user initiates a request, that this application has to be given access to read or write the user data. Then this application actually has to be verified by the server via an application key, or you can say client key and the client secret. So this client provides the client key and the client secret, which is between the server and the client, and server, after validating the key, provides a grant request token so that it can access, or it is allowed to get the access token. After the application being verified, it can get the access token from the user. Using that access token, it will access the server on behalf of the user. So now a couple of URLs being sent to the user to get to the actual service provider from the client. For example, client is a different service, and this is a service provider like Facebook or Twitter. Then user does the authentication. You have to actually enter the username and password. You have to log in to the service provider. You are not giving your username and password to the client here, the application. Remember this is the main point covered by the oAuth standards. And then user gives the permission that, hey, I am allowing this application to access my data, and then based on this the client sends a request to the server get access token for this user, and then after validating that request, server will generate access token and provide it to the client. So client is the application here, or in Informatica adapter. So this is how we get access token, using which we can send requests to the service provider and get the data on behalf of a user account. So I hope we have a certain understanding of how this OAuth authorization works. Now we'll see a quick demo on how we can create a Twitter application, and maybe we will not show how to create a Twitter application, that remains to be done by a user. It is very simple, and then we can configure that same application in Informatica for the adapters to be used. So basically we will be getting the validation done, and we'll get the access token from Informatica's oAuth utility. Okay, so if you can see my screen here, this is the URL for administrator console, and I would like to add this point here that the oAuth tool from Informatica, it is hosted on the administrator process. It's not hosted under the node process. So you have to go to the administrator port, and then OWS is the name of the application deployed on the administrator process. So here is the OAuth utility by Informatica. So we'll select Twitter. Now you have to specify the consumer key and the consumer secret. So these two things you get when you do initial configuration of a Twitter or Facebook application at the service provider. We'll see that shortly. So here I have one application created on Twitter. So you got to get the API key and the API secret, which is nothing but the consumer key and the consumer secret we have to provide in the Informatica's utility. So I'll just copy and I'll put these things there. Now we have consumer key and the consumer secret, which validates the application, or it validates the Informatica's adapter here. And you see there is a callback URL which will be used by the service provider to send back the user to this same page after the authentication or the authorization is done at the service provider rather. So now I'll say authorize. So it took me to the api.twitter.com, and with the help of consumer key and the consumer secret, it will give me what is the application which I am trying to authorize. Okay, now you see it is logged in as my user. Now I have to say authorize app explicitly. It is not done on its own by the service provider or application. So user has to go and say, I clicked it, it says authorize app. Now you can see that authorization is successful. Now you see you get the access token and the access secret. So this is the way we get the authorization done, and the OAuth protocol is actually implemented and used in Informatica, specifically for the adapters like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. So with this I'll stop, and if you have any queries or question, please post in the comments. Thank you so much for your patience.